What if I'm wrong? There's a few players that I've been pretty vocal about this offseason that I wasn't interested in drafting. But now as we approach the beginning of the year, maybe it's time to sit down and reevaluate whether these guys should be on our teams in 2023. Headliner Nation, the beginning of the NFL season is literally in our view. And for those of you that haven't drafted yet, you're probably going to be doing so really soon. So it's now or never. There's no turning back. I need to go through a list of my guys that have been do not drafts for me this season and try to figure out whether or not I need to change my mind given the new information we've been provided. Maybe someone's ADP rose to a spot that I didn't expect. Maybe it dropped somewhere that made me feel like, you know what, that's actually a pretty good value. Maybe something has happened in training camp that has changed my mind and said, you know what, we actually need to be getting this guy. And you know I'm one of the first people to say, you know what, I got that wrong. So I'm gonna try and figure out if I've gotten these guys wrong already. Headliner Nation, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and you know what you should also do? Hit that blue join button down below this video. If you're a fan of our content and you're looking to get even more out of the Headliner Nation experience, joining our memberships here on the channel is an absolutely excellent way to do that. Not only are you gonna get tons of extra content like our in-season flex rankings that the general public don't get to see, but I do film breakdowns all the time trying to look at certain players and see whether or not we're selling or buying those guys. You'll get an opportunity to look at football from a whole different angle. And if you become a member, you're gonna get access to our exclusive Discord channel where you get direct access to Jake, myself, Ethan, Mac, Taylor, the entire Headliner crew, but more importantly, our exclusive Headliner Nation. If you love talking football and you want to make some friends within the community, this is a great way to do so. And if you're a member right now and you've loved what you've gotten out of Discord and your membership, let the people know in the comments down below so they can understand what exactly they're getting from their experience. All right, there are a couple of guys on this list that I've written up about in our draft guide, calling them busts. Now, I'm not gonna tell you which ones, and I'm not gonna break it all down for you because that content is exclusive to the draft guide. Just know that somebody on this list is in there and you may wanna figure out who that is. First up is gonna be Saquon Barkley, and in redraft formats right now, he's going as the RB3 with an ADP of 8.7. Now, at one point this season, Saquon Barkley was more of like a mid to low end RB1, so he is flying up draft boards right now, and it makes sense why. Now the good news is he signed a one-year deal. He's not on the franchise tag right now. We don't have to worry about him not reporting like a Josh Jacobs. He's there, he's gonna be playing this season, and that was always a concern that we were kind of baking into his ADP, but it seems like people are not that concerned anymore. But what you should be concerned about is how volume dependent he was last season. He wasn't really a guy that showed high efficiency stats across the board. He really just relied on getting all of the volume. And with his ADP continuing to rise, there's several guys behind him that I would just rather take a shot on. In fact, where you would be taking Saquon Barkley, I would rather take a shot on one of the wide receivers that are falling a little bit more towards the back half of the first round. Now, with all that being said, he could end up being one of the safer running backs in the league. He's going to get a decent amount of volume. But is the addition of Jalen Hyatt, is the addition of Darren Waller really going to spread the defense out so much that Barkley gets back to being a massive efficiency monster like he was when he came out of the draft? I don't know, because there's so much that hinges on Daniel Jones continuing to develop as a quarterback and taking that next step. So for me, in my final verdict, I am still out on Saquon Barkley. There's too many people going behind him right now that I would much rather have before I draft him. What about Bijan Robinson? Right now, his ADP is bringing him in as the RB4 at 8.7 overall. And with Barkley a minute ago, I just mentioned that there's guys going behind him that I would much rather draft right now. And Bijan is actually one of those guys. But am I still taking him here? Now, what's one of the biggest changes that we've seen with Bijan Robinson? Well, it would be the fact that his ADP is falling, and it's actually fallen pretty dramatically. Now, even though it's completely different than redraft, if you pay attention at all to best ball ADPs, Bijan Robinson was a guy that was going as the RB2 for quite a big time this offseason. And he was a guy that you also were having to draft towards the beginning or middle of the first round. That ADP right there was way too spicy for me. And there are still a few running backs after Bijan Robinson that I think that I would rather have over him. But his ADP is starting to sell me now, because now I can get him at the back half of the first round. But I also think that we have a lot of question marks about the running backs that are being drafted after Bijan Robinson as well. Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, there's people that believe that Tony Pollard isn't going to be able to handle the type of workload that makes a running back a high RB1 prospect. Derrick Henry, when does age and the amount of workload finally catch up to him? And Jonathan Taylor, who knows what's going on down in Indianapolis? So when you look at those guys going after him, Bijan right now is starting to look more and more like a guy that you could get great value with at the end of the first round. The only running back that's going after him right now that I'm like, you know what, I definitely would much rather have him is Nick Chubb. And you know what, if you want to play it safe, I also think Derrick Henry is ranked right above Bijan Robinson right now. But Bijan Robinson is inside the top 5 for me. We know he's going to get a lot of workload. How much does he lose to Tyler Algier? That's still a question mark that we're going to have to try and figure out over the first few weeks of the season. But for me, my verdict is now, I'm good with drafting Bijan Robinson, especially if you're getting him towards the back half of the first round. If you want to spend a high first round pick on him, I'm not on board with that. But if he falls to you at like the 8th, 9th, 10th pick, and that's who you want to go with, still got Nick Chubb over him, but I'm not going to argue against Bijan Robinson anymore. Davante Adams, the wide receiver 8 right now with an ADP of 17.7. Now, he is probably one of the most high-profile players that we have said this year we're just not on board with. Which is interesting because last season, we felt like we were telling everybody to draft him. And what makes this even funnier, there's been a few comments on the channel where people were like, well, you told me not to draft Davante Adams last year, and look what happened. No, we did. We did tell you to draft him last year, but we're not on board this year. The main reason is because Jimmy G just isn't the guy for me. Big reason why Davante Adams had such a huge 2022 was because of the relationship that him and Derek Carr had down the field last season. Now, I know a lot of you out there hate Derek Carr and think he is a terrible quarterback, but he was actually one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, going 20 or more yards down the field last season. And Davante Adams, when you look at the numbers, that's where he lived. That's where he made his money last year. Jimmy Garoppolo can't do that. And it's not because he didn't do it in San Francisco. He's just not good at it when you look at the efficiency numbers as well. I will share this tidbit with you. Davante Adams is in the draft guide, and he's listed under the bust section for me. And I have so many statistics written up in that section of the guide. I think that was my longest profile that I did all off season. If you have the draft guide, make sure you check it out so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But even though Jimmy G isn't the guy, could Aiden O'Connell be the guy? This dude out of Purdue has looked absolutely insane this preseason. Now, it is preseason, but he's actually one of the best passers 20 or more yards down the field this preseason. That's what they needed for Davante Adams. So if Jimmy G isn't the guy, I wonder if Aiden O'Connell would actually be the best guy for him this year. And that actually has got me rethinking Davante Adams just a little bit. Now, again, people are going to argue Davante Adams is going to eat. He's so good. He does this, he does that. And I get it. But you have to keep in mind who he's had as his quarterbacks during his career. First off, he had Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, regardless of what you think of the dude. And then next, he had Derek Carr, a guy that he spent years with in college developing a relationship. These two guys were already on the same page. Now he's going to be going to Jimmy G, who over the course of his career has been okay, but he's not putting up gigantic numbers with people like what we saw last season. And that is my main concern for a guy that you're drafting to probably be your wide receiver 1. But also on top of that, because Jimmy G does some things well over the middle of the field, What are the chances that Hunter Renfrow and Jakobi Meyers become his guys? What if he starts going to those guys more often than he does Davante Adams? Do we see a decrease in that volume that he had last year? And if he doesn't have the big plays to go along with it, is there a chance that we see Davante Adams falling to be more of like a borderline wide receiver one? Man, this is just an issue for me. My final verdict on Davante Adams, I'm still not in on him, because if he has Jimmy G as his quarterback all season long, I think there's going to be a lot of inconsistencies, and there's just more guys behind him that I would rather roll the dice with. I really do find it crazy how much people seem to love Devontae Smith, but they don't think nearly as highly of A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown truthers are just in the background. They're like, give me my boy, we're going off. Devontae Smith truthers are lining up at the gates with pitchforks ready to take everybody else down. Right now, Smith is the wide receiver 13 with an ADP of 26.7. So far, so good. Everybody's healthy this preseason, and I'll knock on wood for good luck. Hopefully it stays that way for them. But last season, when Devontae Smith did the majority of his damage, it was at the end of the year when Dallas Goedert was banged up, and his quarterback in the big two games were Gardner Minshew, not Jalen Hurts. So really the question is going to be, do we get the Devontae Smith from the first half? Remember that guy that was the wide receiver 29 on the season? Or do we get the guy from the second half who, again, had two really big blow-up games with Gardner Minshew at the helm, but outside of that, didn't do a whole lot? He really only had 4 like big games last season. And not only that, but he's being drafted ahead of guys that are like legit wide receiver ones on their team. I mean, you look at a guy like DK Metcalf. Yeah, he's got some competition for targets, but so does Devontae Smith. Alvin Ridley could easily be the number 1 in his offense this season. I mean, Amari Cooper is the alpha in his offense. Yeah, there's other guys around him that could get targets, but he's still the guy. Keenan Allen technically is still the guy. He should get plenty of targets this season. Terry McLaurin, yeah, Jahan Dotson, but he's the number 1 in that offense. Devontae Smith, as long as A.J. Brown is there, will be the number 2. Now, I'm not saying you should draft any of those guys over Devontae Smith, but the questions around Devontae Smith aren't any different than the questions around these guys. So why are we just automatically giving Devontae Smith the benefit of the doubt? For Devontae Smith, I'm still going to be out. I'm not interested in trying to figure out the weekly carousel, especially if he's a guy that you're drafting as your wide receiver 1. That's just too risky for me. Last year, the numbers showed us when everybody was healthy, Devontae Smith was the number 3 target in that offense. Now things could grow this season, but A.J. Brown is going to continue to be the number 1. And Jalen Hurts loves himself some Dallas. We're feeling fancy. Go dare. Devontae Smith, you're going to have some big games, but will the consistency be there for you? Darren Waller, same face, new place, but is his quarterback going to be able to make him the top tier fantasy tight end that we've seen in the past? Waller right now is the tight end 5, going at 62.3 overall. And so far this preseason and training camp, Darren Waller is like Daniel Jones' favorite target. So to see that chemistry building right now, right off the bat, is excellent. If you're somebody that's already drafted Darren Waller, you absolutely want to see this. It looks like we are setting ourselves up for like a diet Travis Kelce, where yeah, the weapons around him might not be the best in the world, but he's going to get fed, and he's going to get fed a lot. Only problem with that is Travis Kelce has Patrick Mahomes. Diet Travis Kelce. Darren Waller has Daniel Jones. So realistically, in this offense, I think we need some other guys to step up. If Jalen Hyatt can showcase that speed that we've seen this preseason and help take some guys deep with him, that will be really, really good for Darren Waller. Saquon Barkley is still going to have to be the guy. Who's going to be playing out of the slot? I think there's still some questions that we really need to figure out. Darren Waller, volume-wise, should be getting a decent amount of look. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that big efficiency also comes with that volume, though, because that really could catapult him all the way up to potentially tight end 2 or tight end 3. Given his current ADP, I'm okay if you smash that. If you find yourself in this area and you've reinforced your running backs and you've got yourself at least one top tier wide receiver, taking Darren Waller is not that bad of a pick, seeing how well him and Daniel Jones are currently working together. Javonte Williams' ADP, outstandingly different this year, right? Coming off the injury, he's now the RB24, and he's going at 65.7 overall. But I think that makes sense given the injury that he's coming off of. You want to know what doesn't make sense? How he's already basically 100% given the injury he's coming off of. It's crazy to me that the Denver Broncos are already looking at Javonte Williams carrying a decent sized workload in week 1. This dude had basically his entire knee shredded to the point where it was hanging by a single ligament. And now this guy is already back at the NFL level getting ready to go. That's absolutely insane. And what is also insane? The insane discount that you're getting this guy at, given his current ADP, especially if he ends up being the main guy this year and putting up, at worst, RB2 numbers. I mean, Javonte Williams is turning into a guy that, if the Broncos aren't hiding anything from us, and he's truly healthy, and he's going to be a big part of the game plan come week 1, Javonte Williams could be a league winner this season. Now, my final verdict on him is we are going to draft him as long as you don't overdraft him. If you get him as like your RB4 right now, I'm absolutely fine with that. Because again, things could end up working out just fine for him if he truly is as healthy as the Broncos are saying that he is. But if you start getting cute, or if his ADP starts to rise and now you're taking him as like your RB2 or something like that, I wouldn't be able to risk it for that. Because at his current ADP, if you put him on your bench as your RB4, oh well, if it doesn't work out, you just cut him loose at some point in time. But if it does work out, like I said, you may have yourself a league winner. Rachaad White, the RB28, 69.7 overall. I find it super weird that Lit Nick is joining millions of drafts all over the place and taking White here just to keep his ADP the same. And at the beginning of the year, I was on Rachaad White. I actually liked this dude. I thought a breakout campaign was in the works. But then I did my DRBR numbers. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's the dynamic running back rating. It's a big part of our draft guide. That really tells us what the upside is for a specific player. And I use a lot of different categories to try and figure this formula out for you. They're not good. His efficiency was awful last year. And a couple weeks ago, someone did argue, well, his efficiency was bad because of Leonard Fournette. But that's why I took a look at a per touch efficiency basis, because obviously volume-wise, he wasn't that great. Because you're right, he got a lot of touches that were taken by Leonard Fournette. But throughout the course of the season, because even at the end of last year, we talked about how Tampa Bay was slowly trying to work him more and more into the game plan and include him a little bit more. And even with Tom Brady as his quarterback last season, on a per-touch basis, Rachaad White was one of the worst running backs in all of football in efficiency categories. And now, as it was just announced, Baker Mayfield is going to be your quarterback. Now, Baker Mayfield, in the past, the Bake Show himself, has shown us that he's capable of being an NFL quarterback. And at other times, it's been an absolute cluster. You know what? So do we really think this offense gets better with Baker Mayfield than what it was with Tom Brady last year? And not only that, but Rachaad White has some guys behind him that maybe they don't take the lead back role, but they take portions of the role. Keyshawn Vaughn is expected to be the number 2, and there's been some praise about him so far this offseason. In fact, there has been talk that Vaughn could see 25 to 30% of the running back touches on the ground. And if Tampa Bay isn't that good, we could also see Chase Edmonds take on a pretty big role in the passing game, coming in on third downs or when the team is behind. Any type of hurry up offense, Chase Edmonds could be the guy in the passing game. So if you're going to be missing out on like 25% of the touches on the ground, and you're not going to be getting some of the third down work, and a lot of the passing game work potentially goes to Chase Edmonds, that doesn't leave you with a whole lot of upside. So again, I acknowledge, yeah, earlier in the offseason, I was all aboard Rachaad Rachaad White. And then I've been trying to warn you guys about him for several weeks now. This is a guy that I'm going to stay put on. And if I'm wrong on Rachaad White, I'll be wrong on Rachaad White. But the numbers that I have used for the past 6 years to determine some of the biggest breakouts at the running back position, Headliner Nation, y'all know who I'm talking about. Those same numbers do not point to a breakout for Rachaad White. They actually point to him being mediocre at best this season. Unfortunately, no. My final verdict is I am out. The RB34 and 96 overall player right now in the ADP, Antonio Gibson, is starting to catch my eye a little bit more and a little bit more. I mean, Brian Robinson really started to dominate this backfield last season, and it feels like we're going into year 3 of trying to figure out what Washington wants to do with Antonio Gibson. It feels like they love him one week and they hate him the next. And that's why I've always been concerned. Are they really going to make him into the pass catching weapon that he once was? And honestly, yeah, it looks like Washington is committing to Antonio Gibson in this role, which honestly, I think it fits Antonio Gibson really well. Remember, this was a college wide receiver that was drafted to play running back, and he could be in for a lot of checkdowns from Sam Howell, who has looked really good in the preseason so far. And Antonio Gibson is really the perfect type of guy if you're in like a PPR league and you're looking to stash somebody on your bench that you could potentially fit into the flex any given week. And that's really what Antonio Gibson has become. If you're drafting him because you think he's going to be an RB2 and win you a championship, I think you're probably drafting him a little bit too early. But if you're drafting him as like your RB4 or heck, even RB5, and he's sitting on your bench and he is a guy that if you have an injury, if you have a bye week, maybe Brian Robinson goes down for a game or whatever, maybe one of the other pass catchers misses a game, Antonio Gibson becomes a guy that you can slot into the flex, and just based on the floor with what he could get volume-wise in the passing game, he might not lose you a week. So am I buying in at his current ADP after earlier this offseason I said, man, I just don't know if I trust Washington? Well, like a couple that's celebrating their 30th anniversary together, I'm willing to try anything. You know what, Headliner Nation? We don't fear our potential misses here, and we also don't fear turning around and saying, you know what? I think I got it wrong with this guy. And I think it really does us a lot of justice to sit back and say, yeah, maybe we made this prediction 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks ago, but now we have more information and I think we need to change it. Because you know what I would rather do? I would rather say to you all, maybe I was wrong right now. Let's reverse course and maybe do this a little bit differently, then stick to my guns after I find out this new information and then potentially have to bite that bullet later in the season. With some of these guys on this video, I think we need to kind of change our opinions a little bit. And maybe you were already on board. Maybe I'm the only one that needs to change my opinion. But at the right ADP for some of these guys, I'm definitely willing to buy in. Do me a favor, if you're here right now still watching, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and consider hitting that blue join button down below so you can become a member of this great community, an exclusive member, I should say. And leave me a comment down below. Pick somebody that earlier this offseason you were like, there's no way in the world I'm drafting this guy. And now you've reversed course and you've said, you know what? I'm actually good. I want him now. Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here today. Peace out. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.